Hi, it's Mr. Anderson, and in this podcast, I'm going to talk about biogeochemical cycles. Now, that's quite a mouthful. So if we break that down, that's life, earth, chemical cycling. So basically, it's how chemicals move from living things to non-living things and then back again. And so up here I've written this, which is just a mnemonic device to remember the atoms that life needs to survive, CHNOPS. And it's carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. And so before we actually talk about cycling, let's talk about why we actually need these atoms. And we're going to start with carbon. And try to be ahead of me. In other words, before I flip the slide, you should be planning ahead. Why do we need carbon? Why do we need hydrogen? So let's go to carbon. So why do we need carbon? Well, carbon, remember, has 4 valence electrons. So it's really good at bonding. And so it's good at making complex organic material. And so basically, if you're thinking of a protein or lipids or carbohydrates or nucleic acids like DNA, all of these things are built out of carbon, and that's because carbon is incredibly good at building upon itself. If we go to the next one, why is hydrogen important? Hydrogen is important because it makes up water, and water in general is important just because of its solubility, and it can provide a medium where life can exist. But it also can provide energy. And so if we look here, this is the light-dependent reaction in photosynthesis, and you can see these protons as they flow through ATP synthase are actually making energy in the form of ATP. And so hydrogen is important just through water, but also energy transfer. So be thinking ahead. Why do we need nitrogen? Well, nitrogen we need for a couple of reasons. This right here is a amino acid. And remember, DNA contains the blueprint to make life, but it's the proteins that actually make us the way we are. And this right here is an amino acid. All amino acids are going to have a carbon in the middle and a hydrogen attached to that. They're then going to have an amino group on one side and a carboxyl on the other side, and then an R group. That's going to be the difference in every amino acid. But this nitrogen right here is required to make amino acids or to build proteins, and so we need that nitrogen to survive. This over here is guanine. Where's guanine found? Well, when you're talking about DNA, what's in the middle, in other words, what stores the information, are the nitrogenous bases. Guanine is just one, but we also have cytosine, thymine, and adenine. And so guanine, if you look here, has a whole bunch of nitrogen in it. And that nitrogen we have to get from our atmosphere just to make the genetic material. Let's go to the next one, oxygen. Why do we need oxygen? Well, water, of course, we need oxygen for. But I also included cellular respiration here because way at the end of cellular respiration, oxygen is receiving those electrons, and so we can get a huge amount of energy as those electrons fall to oxygen. Likewise, when we pull them away in photosynthesis, we can store a lot of energy. If we go to the next one, phosphorus. Why do we need phosphorus? Well, we need phosphorus for a few reasons. Number one, this would be a phospholipid. That makes up our lipid bilayers, and it's going to have a phosphate in its head. If we look on the DNA right here, on the DNA we're going to have, remember, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate backbone. And so phosphorus is important in making our nuclear material. And the one thing that I should have included on here is ATP. And remember, ATP is adenosine triphosphate. And as we attach that last phosphate on, we're storing energy. Likewise, we can release energy as we let it go. And so CHNOPS is a good way to remember all the things that we need. And again, we need them for various reasons. And so we have to get them from our environment. Because if you think about energy, how does energy get from the sun to the earth? It just travels as light. Once it gets to the earth, it's eventually used, but it also eventually ends up being given off as something called heat. And so the way that energy gets to our planet is one direction. It's going to move in one direction, then it eventually ends up as heat. But the nutrients on our planet are different. The nutrients on our planet are going to be recycled. In other words, the amount of water that we have on our planet is static. The amount of carbon that we have is static. And it has to be recycled over and over and over again on biosphere, which is the earth. And they tried to do this in the Arizona desert where they built this, which is Biosphere 2. They tried to keep all the nutrients inside this biosphere that they needed to survive. They let light in, but they tried to recycle the nutrients. It worked okay. They didn't really get a good balance, and so they had to open it up occasionally. And so there are cycles by which we can return that from life to non-life and then back again. Remember, what we're talking about is biogeochemical cycling. How do we go from living to non-living?